Krazak 9 Prime stared at the emergency broadcast display, his four eyes blinking in perfect synchronization. The message flickered across 13 different frequencies, each one screaming the same desperate plea into the void of space. Emergency. Emergency. The Galactic mining station Omega-7 is under attack. Hostile forces have breached our defenses. We are a civilian operation with minimal military support. Any nearby vessels, please assist. Coordinates follow. He clicked his mandibles together, a sound that roughly translated to bitter amusement in his species. 23 rotations he had been monitoring deep space communications, and this was the first distress call he had ever received that actually sounded genuine. Most were either pirates trying to lure merchant ships into traps, or military exercises designed to test response times. But this one had that particular flavor of terror that you just could not fake. Computer, run analysis on transmission source, Krazak commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much in his long career as an intelligence officer for the Xerian Federation. The artificial intelligence responded immediately. Transmission originates from Sector 77 Alpha. Mining station Omega-7 confirmed operational as of last standard cycle. Station houses approximately 12,000 civilian workers, mostly from the Talaran and Hexpian colonies. Krazak's secondary eyes narrowed. Civilians, always civilians. The galaxy seemed to have an endless supply of innocent beings who somehow found themselves in the wrong place at precisely the worst possible time. Any Federation vessels in range to respond? Negative. Nearest Federation patrol is 47 standard hours away at maximum velocity. What about other military assets? The computer paused for a moment, processing. Scanning, one unregistered vessel detected in approximate vicinity. Classification unknown. Transmission logs indicate origin from Sol system. Krazak's blood temperature dropped 3 degrees. Sol system. Earth. In all his rotations of service he had heard whispers about the humans. Terrible whispers. The kind of stories that senior officers told junior officers late at night, when the duty shift was long and the conversation had turned to the darker corners of galactic history. Humans were problematic. They had appeared on the galactic stage only recently, maybe 50 standard cycles ago. A species that had somehow managed to survive on what could only be described as a death world. Their planet was covered in violent weather systems, filled with predators that could kill beings twice their size, and somehow they had not only survived but thrived. The Federation had made first contact with them during what the humans called their Tuesday. The human ambassador, a small female named Victoria Hayes, had greeted the Federation delegation with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. She had offered them something called coffee and donuts, and had spent 3 hours explaining their species' history of warfare with the same casual tone most beings used to discuss crop rotations. Within one rotation, humans had petitioned for membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. Within 2, they had been politely declined. Within 3, they had formed their own defense pacts with 6 different species who had previously been at war with each other. The humans, it seemed, had a talent for making friends. More importantly, they had an even greater talent for making their friends' enemies very, very nervous. In computer, attempt to establish communication with the human vessel. Tempting connection established. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human face that Krazak immediately recognized as belonging to the male gender. The human appeared to be middle-aged by their species' standards, with short brown hair and what humans called 5 o'clock shadow covering the lower portion of his face. His eyes were green, and they held an expression that Krazak found deeply unsettling. The human looked amused. Well, the human said, his voice carrying that distinctive accent that Federation linguists had identified as originating from the North American continent. If it isn't one of our Xerian friends. Afternoon, officer. Marcus Webb here, captain of the trading vessel Sweet Caroline. I'm guessing you picked up that distress call too. Krazak straightened in his command chair, falling back on diplomatic protocol. Greetings, Captain Webb. I am Intelligence Officer Krezak 9 Prime of the Zerian Federation. Yes, we have received the distress transmission from Mining Station Omega 7. However, I must inform you that this appears to be a military situation requiring trained personnel and appropriate equipment. Captain Webb's grin widened. Oh, I appreciate the concern, officer. Really, I do. But see, here's the thing about us humans. He leaned back in his chair, and Krezak could see what appeared to be several other humans moving around in the background of the transmission. We have this really annoying habit of showing up when people need help, even when those people are complete strangers. Even when helping them might get us killed. Captain, with respect, civilian vessels should not engage hostile military forces. The attacking fleet will likely consist of heavily armed warships with superior firepower and defensive capabilities. Yeah, about that. Webb's expression shifted slightly, and for just a moment Krezak glimpsed something that made his survival instinct scream warnings. We might not be exactly what you would call a typical civilian vessel. Before Krezak could respond, his sensor operator's voice cut through the bridge. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting the attacking fleet. 12 vessels, heavily armed. Configuration matches known Skulex raider patterns. Krezak's blood ran cold. Skulex raiders were not ordinary pirates. They were a nomadic warrior culture that viewed civilian casualties not as regrettable necessities, but as entertainment. They took prisoners only long enough to extract information about other potential targets. Everyone else was simply eliminated. Captain Webb, Krezak said urgently, you must withdraw immediately. Skulex raiders do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They will destroy any vessel that interferes with their operations. Captain Webb was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a tone that Krezak had never heard from a human before. It was cold, professional, deadly. Officer Krezak, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to run a background check on my vessel registration. I need you to look up exactly what the Sweet Caroline is classified as in your Federation databases. Krezak hesitated, then activated his terminal. Computer, run detailed scan on vessel registration for Sweet Caroline, Captain Marcus Webb, Sol System Origin. The computer processed for several seconds longer than usual. When it responded, its synthetic voice carried what almost sounded like confusion. Unable to locate standard civilian registration. Cross-referencing with military databases, cross-referencing with intelligence databases, match found. Vessel Sweet Caroline classified as Humanitarian Relief and Resource Recovery Specialist. Captain Marcus Webb, former commander, Earth Defense Force Special Operations Division. Vessel crew complement, 47. Mission classification, restricted. Krezak stared at the display in growing alarm. Captain Webb, what exactly is a Humanitarian Relief and Resource Recovery Specialist? Webb's grin returned, but this time it held no warmth whatsoever. It's what we call ourselves when we are not allowed to call ourselves what we really are. See, the thing about humans, officer, is that we have spent our entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that were bigger, faster, and stronger than we were. We got really, really good at it. The transmission shifted, and Krezak could see more of the human ship's interior. What he saw made his mandibles click involuntarily. The corridors were lined with equipment that looked nothing like standard civilian gear. Weapons lockers, armor stations, and humans, lots of humans, all moving with the purposeful efficiency of trained soldiers. When we joined the Galactic community, Webb continued, we discovered that there were beings out there who liked to hurt civilians. Beings who thought that just because someone was smaller or weaker or less technologically advanced, that made them fair game for slavery, torture, or worse. A new voice joined the conversation, and Krezak saw a human female appear beside Webb. She was shorter than the captain, with black hair tied back in what humans called a ponytail. Her eyes were dark brown, and they held the same unsettling expression as Webb's. "Hi there, officer," she said cheerfully. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, formerly of Earth Marine Force Reconnaissance. Just wanted to let you know that we have been tracking the Skullex raiders for about 6 months now. They have hit 14 civilian targets in the past year. We have been waiting for them to pick on someone who could actually call for help. Krazak felt his world tilting slightly. You have been hunting them? Webb nodded. The thing about distress calls, officer, is that they travel through space at light speed. By the time anyone receives them and responds, the attack is usually over. The raiders are gone, and all you find are wreckage and bodies. But this time, Lieutenant Chen added, we were already here. We have been following their movement patterns, staying just far enough away that their sensors would not detect us. When we heard that distress call, well, she shrugged. We figured it was time to introduce ourselves. Krazak watched in fascination and growing horror as the tactical display updated. The Skullex fleet was closing on the mining station, their weapons charging for the initial bombardment. But something else was happening. The human ship, which had been running silent at the edge of sensor range, suddenly lit up like a small star. Sweet Caroline to Mining Station Omega 7, Webb's voice broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Marcus Webb of Earth Defense. We have received your distress call and we are responding. Please maintain your position and prepare for immediate evacuation procedures. The response came immediately, filled with static and the sound of explosions in the background. Unknown vessel, this is Station Commander Dex 2 Alpha. We are under heavy attack. Skullex raiders have broken through our outer defenses. We have wounded and our shields are failing. We cannot evacuate, our transport vessels have been destroyed. Understood, Commander. We will handle the raiders. You just focus on keeping your people alive for the next 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Commander Dex's voice cracked with strain. Unknown vessel, there are 12 raider ships out there. They have enough firepower to level a small moon. You are just one ship. Webb looked directly at Krazak through the communication link, and his expression was absolutely terrifying in its calm confidence. Commander, I need you to trust me on this. We humans have a saying, it is not the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog. Lieutenant Chen laughed, and the sound was like broken glass. Besides, we brought friends. Krazak's sensors suddenly exploded with new contacts. Ships materialized out of nowhere, dropping their stealth fields and active camouflage systems. Not just human ships, but vessels from dozens of different species. Talaran attack cruisers, Hexpian defense platforms, even several ships that Krazak recognized as belonging to the notoriously peaceful Quillan Collective. This is Admiral Lisa Santos of the 3rd Humanitarian Fleet, a new human voice announced. All civilian vessels, please maintain safe distance. Military vessels, you know your assignments. Let us show these raiders what happens when you pick on our friends. The Skullex fleet, which had been closing confidently on the mining station, suddenly found themselves surrounded by 37 warships that had appeared out of literally nowhere. The raider commander's voice cut through the communication channels, filled with confusion and growing panic. The unknown vessels, you are interfering with legitimate salvage operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Santos responded in a voice that could have frozen liquid hydrogen. Skullex Raider Fleet, this is Admiral Lisa Santos of the Human Defense Force. You are hereby ordered to stand down and surrender. You have exactly 60 seconds to comply before we demonstrate why attacking civilians is a really bad idea. Krazak watched his tactical display with something approaching religious awe. The human fleet had not just surrounded the raiders, they had positioned themselves with mathematical precision to create overlapping fields of fire that would make escape impossible. More importantly, every single one of their weapons was already charged and targeted. The Skullex commander's response was predictable. Humans, we should have known you cannot protect everyone, humans. And when we are done here, we will remember this interference. Admiral Santos' laugh was heard across 13 star systems. Oh, sweetie, you are not going to remember anything. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. When it was over, there were no Skullx raiders left to remember anything. 3 standard hours later, Krezak found himself aboard the mining station Omega-7, watching human medics work alongside Talaran engineers and Hexpian technicians in what could only be described as organized chaos. The station's main corridor had been converted into a makeshift medical facility, and the air hummed with the sound of repair drones fixing hull breaches. What disturbed Krezak most was not the efficiency of the human rescue operation. It was how normal they all acted about it. "Pass me that neural stabilizer, would you?" Dr. Emma Rodriguez called out to a Quillan medic, her hands never pausing as she worked on a badly injured Hexpian engineer. "This little guy took some shrapnel to his primary thinking organ, but I think we can save him." The Quillan, a species known for their pacifist philosophy and healing abilities, worked alongside the human doctor without any apparent concern about the fact that she had recently been involved in what could only be described as a systematic extermination of 12 heavily armed warships. Dr. Rodriguez, Krezak approached cautiously. "Might I have a word?" She glanced up from her patient, her face streaked with various colors of alien blood. "Sure thing, officer. Just give me 2 more minutes to finish closing this neural pathway." "What's on your mind?" Krezak waited, watching as she completed what appeared to be incredibly delicate surgery with the casual confidence of someone fixing a broken appliance. When she finally stepped back and allowed the Quillan to take over, he gestured toward a quieter section of the corridor. "Dr. Rodriguez, I must ask you directly. What exactly are you people?" She pulled off her surgical gloves and tossed them into a disposal unit. "We're humans, officer. I thought that was pretty obvious." "That is not what I mean, and you know it." Krezak's mandibles clicked with frustration. 4 hours ago, I watched your species eliminate 12 warships in less than 5 minutes. Now I am watching you perform surgery that most Federation medical facilities would consider beyond their capabilities. You rescued 12,000 civilians, repaired critical station infrastructure, and somehow managed to coordinate with 6 different species without any apparent prior communication. Dr. Rodriguez leaned against the wall, considering his words. "You know what your problem is, officer. You're thinking too small. Explain." She gestured toward the activity around them. "See, most species in this galaxy, when they achieve space travel, they spread out. They find nice, safe planets with reasonable weather and non-threatening wildlife. They build comfortable colonies and focus on maintaining their standard of living." Krezak nodded. This was basic galactic sociology. "Humans didn't get that option," she continued. "Earth tried to kill us for about 3 million years. We had to learn to survive ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plague, famine, predators that could bite us in half, and weather systems that could level entire cities. But here's the thing that really sets us apart." She paused, and Krezak found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. "We learned to do it together." Before Krezak could respond, a new voice interrupted their conversation. "Doctor, we need you in Medical Bay 3. We've got a Skullx survivor." Both Krezak and Dr. Rodriguez turned to see a young human male, probably barely out of adolescence by their species' standards. He wore the same uniform as the other humans, but his rank insignia indicated he was some sort of junior technician. "A survivor?" Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "I thought Admiral Santos said there were no survivors." "Well, technically there weren't," the young human grinned sheepishly. "But Tommy found this guy floating in an escape pod about 2 hours after the fight ended. He's pretty banged up, and he keeps trying to bite anyone who gets too close." Krezak felt his world tilt again. "You rescued a Skullx raider?" Dr. Rodriguez was already moving toward Medical Bay 3. "Of course we did. He's injured. But he was trying to kill civilians. He was part of a fleet that has murdered thousands of innocent beings." She stopped and turned back to face him, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked genuinely confused by his question. "Officer Krezak, what exactly do you think we should have done?" Left him to die. That is exactly what most species would do, yes. Well, we're not most species. Medical Bay 3 had been converted from what appeared to be a storage facility. Portable medical equipment lined the walls, and the air smelled of antiseptic and something that might have been fear. In the center of the room, strapped to a medical bed, was a Skulex raider. Krazak had seen images of the Skulex, but he had never been in the same room with one before. The creature was roughly humanoid in shape but covered in dark, chitinous armor that grew directly from its skin. Its head was elongated, with multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth, and its eyes were solid black. Even injured and restrained, it radiated an aura of barely controlled violence. "Get away from me, human filth." The Skulex snarled as Dr. Rodriguez approached. "I will rip your throat out with my teeth. I will feast on your entrails." Yeah, Dr. Rodriguez said dismissively, checking the creature's vital signs on a nearby monitor. "You'll eat my liver, dance on my grave, probably something about wearing my skin as a trophy." "I've heard it all before, sweetie." The Skulex seemed taken aback by her casual dismissal of its threats. You are not afraid." "Should I be?" She began examining its wounds with the same professional detachment she had shown with the civilian casualties. "You're strapped to a medical bed, you have 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and what looks like a severe concussion. Right now you're about as threatening as an angry house cat. I am Skulex. We are the terror of 17 star systems. We take what we want and kill anyone who stands in our way." Dr. Rodriguez paused in her examination and looked directly at the creature. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone that Krazak was beginning to recognize as distinctly dangerous. "Let me tell you something about humans, big guy. We've been dealing with bullies for our entire evolutionary history. And you know what we learned about bullies." She leaned closer to the Skulex, who had suddenly gone very quiet. "They're usually not as tough as they pretend to be." The medical bay fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support equipment. The Skulex stared at the human doctor with what might have been the first genuine fear Krazak had ever seen from one of their species. "You killed my fleet," the Skulex said quietly. 12 ships, 300 warriors." "Yes, we did." Dr. Rodriguez resumed her examination. "And we would do it again without hesitation if you threatened innocent civilians. But you saved me." "Yes." "Why?" Dr. Rodriguez paused, considering her answer. "Because that's what separates us from you. You see weakness and you exploit it. You see fear and you feed on it. You see someone who can't fight back and you hurt them because it makes you feel powerful." She activated a medical scanner and began treating the creature's internal injuries. "But humans? We see someone who's hurt and we try to help them, even if they're our enemy, even if they would kill us given the chance. Because the moment we stop caring about life, all life, we become exactly what we're fighting against." The Skulex was quiet for a long time, watching as the human doctor worked to save its life. Finally it spoke again, and its voice was different, smaller. "What will you do with me now?" "Fix you up, make sure you're healthy, then turn you over to Federation authorities for trial." She looked up from her instruments. "Though I suspect you'll be spending a very long time in prison. My people will not accept this. When they learn what happened here, they will send more fleets. Bigger fleets." Dr. Rodriguez smiled, and Krazak felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "Oh, sweetie, you really don't understand what happened here today, do you?" She activated a wall display, showing what appeared to be a galactic map. Red dots marked locations throughout several sectors. This wasn't just about saving mining station Omega-7. This was about sending a message. Every Skulex fleet in this quadrant has been eliminated. Every raider base has been located and neutralized. Every slave ship has been boarded and its prisoners freed. The Skulex stared at the display in growing horror. Impossible. We had ships scattered across 12 systems, sad being the operative term. Captain Webb's voice came from the doorway as he entered the medical bay. Turns out when you spend 50 years building a network of species who all agree that hurting innocent people is wrong, you can coordinate some pretty impressive operations. He approached the medical bed, and the Skulex instinctively tried to press itself back against the restraints. See, the thing about humans is that we're really good at making friends. And our friends, they're really good at sharing information. Navigation routes, supply caches, safe harbors. Amazing what you can accomplish when everyone involved actually wants to help. You cannot have eliminated all of us, the Skulex whispered. We are too spread out. Too numerous. Captain Webb activated a communication device on his wrist. Admiral Santos, could you give our guest here an update on Operation Pest Control? Admiral Santos' voice filled the medical bay. Certainly, Captain. Final tally: 47 Skulex vessels destroyed, 18 bases neutralized, approximately 4,000 prisoners liberated and returned to their home worlds. Total human casualties, 0. Total Allied casualties, 3 minor injuries. The Skulex made a sound that might have been a whimper. The thing about being pirates, Webb continued conversationally, is that everyone knows where you are. Every merchant ship you rob, every colony you attack, every distress signal you ignore, it all gets reported. And when someone like us decides to follow those reports back to their source, he shrugged. Well, let's just say it doesn't end well for the pirates. Krazak found his voice at last. Captain Webb, what exactly is the humanitarian fleet? I have never heard of such an organization. Webb's expression grew serious. It's what happens when humans get tired of being reactive. For years we responded to distress calls, showed up after the fact, rescued survivors and helped rebuild. But eventually we realized we were fighting the symptoms instead of the disease. Dr. Rodriguez finished her work on the Skulex and began packing up her equipment. So we decided to be proactive. We started tracking the bad guys, learning their patterns, building networks with species who shared our values. And when we got tired of always arriving too late to help, Webb added, we started arriving early. The Skulex had been listening to this conversation with growing amazement. You built an entire military force dedicated to protecting people you have never met. Not just military, Dr. Rodriguez corrected. Technical ships, engineering vessels, supply convoys, refugee transports. The humanitarian fleet isn't about conquest or territory or resources. It's about making sure that when someone calls for help, help actually comes. But why? The question came out as barely a whisper. What do you gain from this? Captain Webb was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire room. When humans first reached for the stars, we carried with us all of our history. The good and the bad. We had been soldiers and healers, builders and destroyers. We had saved lives and taken them. We had created beauty and unleashed horror. He looked directly at the Skulex, then at Krazak. But we also carried with us something else. A dream of what we could become if we chose to be better than we had been. The idea that maybe, just maybe, we could build something out here that was worth all the pain it took to reach it. Dr. Rodriguez nodded. Every species we have met, every friend we have made, every life we have saved, it all adds to that dream, makes it more real. And every time someone like you tries to turn the galaxy into a place where strength is the only law and cruelty is the only currency, Webb's voice hardened. You threaten that dream. You threaten our friends. You threaten the future we are trying to build. He leaned over the medical bed, and the Skulex cringed away from him. So when we heard that distress call, when we learned that you were out there hurting innocent people just because you could, we did what humans have always done when faced with bullies. Captain Webb smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Krazak had ever seen. We showed up with bigger sticks and better friends, and we reminded you why picking on people smaller than you is a really bad idea. As they left the medical bay, Krazak found himself walking alongside Dr. Rodriguez through corridors filled with the sounds of repair work and quiet conversation. The station was coming back to life, its people returning to their duties with the resilience that seemed common to civilian populations throughout the galaxy. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said quietly, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Shoot." "Do you ever regret it? The violence, I mean. The necessity of killing to protect others?" She was quiet for so long that he began to think she would not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Every day, officer. Every single day. But you know what I regret more?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. "The 18 colonies that the Skulix destroyed before we found them. The 40,000 people who died while we were still trying to figure out where the attacks were coming from. The families who will never be reunited because we were not fast enough or smart enough or strong enough to save them." Her eyes held a sadness that seemed to encompass entire worlds. "We humans learned a long time ago that the universe is not fair. Bad things happen to good people, and sometimes the only way to stop it is with violence. We do not like it. We do not celebrate it. But we accept it as the price of building something better." As they reached the main corridor, Krezak could see human ships through the station's viewports, their crews working alongside dozens of other species to repair damage and distribute supplies. It was, he realized, exactly what Dr. Rodriguez had described: different people from different worlds working together toward a common goal, building something better. "Officer Krezak," Captain Webb's voice came from behind them. "My crew tells me you have been assigned to write a report on today's events." Krezak turned to face the human captain. "That is correct. The Azarian Federation will want a complete analysis of the incident and its implications." Webb nodded thoughtfully. "What will you tell them about us?" It was, Krezak realized, the most important question he had ever been asked. His answer would influence how his government, and possibly dozens of other governments, viewed humanity going forward. He thought about the efficiency with which the human fleet had eliminated the Skulix raiders. He thought about the compassion with which they had treated both the victims and their sole surviving enemy. He thought about the vast network of friendships and alliances they had built across species lines that should have been impossible to cross. Most of all, he thought about their dream. The idea that maybe, just maybe, they could build something in the galaxy that was worth the cost of reaching for it. "I will tell them the truth, Captain Webb, that when a cry for help went out into the void, the monsters of Earth answered. And that the galaxy is safer because they did." Captain Webb smiled, and for the first time since Krezak had met him, it held nothing but warmth. "Thank you, officer. That means more than you know." As the human ships prepared to depart, their mission complete, Krezak found himself standing at an observation deck, watching them disappear into the starfield. Around him, the rescued civilians of mining station Omega-7 continued the work of rebuilding their lives, secure in the knowledge that somewhere out in the darkness, monsters with human faces were standing guard. And for the first time in his long career, Intelligence Officer Krezak 9 Prime found himself believing that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy really could become the place that humans dreamed it could be. After all, they had bigger sticks and better friends, and they had shown up when it mattered. What more could anyone ask for?